All right, let's call this the Athletic Philosopher Podcast, episode 9. Maybe it's episode 8.2. Either way, this is going to be the second race recap podcast of my Backyard Ultra Prairie on Fire 2024 experience. And I'm excited to dive a little bit more deeply into my own race experience as an athlete. The previous race pod that I recorded focused a lot more on my journey as a coach and what I experienced sort of building towards the race in 2024 and watching 4 of my one-on-one clients all reach personal bests while running in the race with them. And that was the pod that I just recorded last week, so that's number 8. So check that out if you haven't got a chance yet. I would say it's a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more representative of the kind of work that I do with training and athletics in helping people achieve incredible breakthroughs in mind, body, and spirit. But today, I'm going to put the shine and the focus and the spotlight on me, which is a little bit awkward and something I don't appreciate doing a lot. So this will be a good experience and a good experiment in a bunch of different ways. So there are a few things that I want to get to in this podcast. I've also talked about my philosophic training in previous podcast episodes. I think I'll talk a little bit about my physical training coming into the race, where my head was at in terms of mindset, how things went on race day, what it was like compared to last year. And importantly, I want this episode to be framed by the fact that this was, we'll call it, my first real competition in probably about 20 years. Now, when I say my first real competition, I've been in races before. I've signed up and I've played in some rec leagues, in hockey and in soccer. But I haven't been in a game or an athletic contest that really mattered in terms of the results. Basically, having to go all the way back to the last rep soccer game that I played, where I absolutely destroyed my left ankle and left the field in a crumpled pile for the second year in a row. Nasty left leg injuries did in my elite soccer career. And that was back when I was 17. Wow. And I really haven't taken any competition seriously until then. And I was the kind of athlete growing up that hated to lose. Now, I mean, hated to lose. And while that can be positive in terms of driving you to work hard, and certainly within the competition to give it your all, but I knew that there was a negative part of that side of me, that sort of character trait. And I worked really hard to control that hyper-competitive part of myself. And a lot of the stories that I told myself about myself was that when I get into a competition, that animal inside is unleashed and I don't have the ability to control what happens in that competitive sphere. And this certainly was really good in helping me get to elite levels in soccer, but also just in terms of my youth, competing in school, academics, those types of things, for example. And so this race in 2024, this Prairie on Fire Backyard Ultra, was the first time that I've entered a competition and aimed myself at performance as one of the more important metrics. I've been in 3 endurance races in the past year, and the main goal for each one of those was service and community. When I ran the 50K Full Mo Ultra in Indianapolis last year, my first ever race, it was to meet people who I'd become close to in the Indianapolis area through groups, through coaching, through business mentorships, and I'd been prevented from traveling to the United States for 3 years for reasons everybody can fill in. and this was a real celebration for me, and just wanting to be with all those people. And same when I came to the 2023 Prairie on Fire Backyard Ultra, it was to run with people. And then when a lot of the people didn't show up, it was to support and be in service of my one of my best friends and coaching partners, Dylan Spina, who wanted to go for 100 miles or more, and I was simply there to pace and to support him. And then what? Zion 100 at the beginning of this year. That was 10 people on our tribal training team, all going through the Zion 100 ultramile endurance course together as a unit. And that was the goal of that. It wasn't about individual performance. It was about team building and team movement. And so this race was the very first one where I was challenged both publicly but also then internally about really letting out that competitor inside of me and going for the best performance I could. Now, when I looked at the results from last year in the field, the winner of this Backyard Ultra, which again is a racing format where you run a 4 1/6 mile loop on the hour every hour. You can finish as fast as you want. You can finish as slow as you want. You can have 20 minutes in the camp. You can have 10 seconds in the camp. When you come back, you're always coming back to the same place and leaving from the same place. And whoever is left running the last lap is the winner. So in 2023, I went out at 15 laps, my own choice, which is about 100K. And the winner went 6 more laps, 6 hours more of running, and ended up with 87.5 miles. I went about 62.5 miles. So I thought to myself, if I didn't take myself out of the race and I went for it, I think I got a good chance to go as long, if not longer, than that 87.5 mile mark set the year before. And so we'll say it's an ambitious goal, but I don't think it was unrealistic based on the information I was using, that I wanted to try to win this race, or at least be one of the last people standing, or hit 100 miles, or go further than any other tribal athlete in this race format or in any other race format. Like, these were kind of the big performance goals that were orienting me, winning obviously being number one, but those other goals down the line, all really performance based. And I was being sort of pushed positively by my teammates, by some of my coaching clients, in order to show this part of myself in competition. So that meant I had to train a little bit differently. Now, I talked about my training philosophy when it came to this race in a previous podcast, as I mentioned earlier, so go check that one out. Cole's notes on that. I imagined the type of person who would win a running race like this, and I simply tried to inhabit that identity. So the first goal of my training was fall in love with running. Love the idea of running. Be grateful and appreciative that you always get to go out and do a little bit more running. And at the beginning of every single lap, even that final one at 21, where I finished this year, I was always saying to everybody around me, let's have fun. Isn't it great we get to go do this one more time? And we should be appreciative for the chance to get to prove ourselves. But physically, what did that look like, right? This is a podcast about my race experience, more from the physical and athlete side. So that meant running 4 miles, and that was the second part of this race. If I'm running 4-mile loops forever, I want to know what 4 miles feels like. And the biggest thing that I changed this year from last year in terms of my training was running 4 miles on the road fast. And not like dying in terms of threshold, but just running at a more natural cadence, running at a more natural pace and flow for myself, which is a lot closer to, say, like 7-minute miles than it is to 9-minute miles, which I had been training and practicing in the year before. And I did that in order to feel good in my legs. Like, that was the point. The point of this particular physical training strategy was to feel confidence, in my ability as a runner, and to feel confidence that my legs, even if they were sore, if they were tired, if they were a little bit beat up, would be able to respond. I wanted that psychological feeling of going out on a run, feeling a little bit broken, but then recognizing that during the run, my body responds and feels better. So those faster kind of runs on the road really allowed me to feel that sensation where I might start off with the idea in my head, oh, I'm not going to go very fast and I'm just going to run by feel. And I would just run and I'd look down at my watch after mile 1 and I'd see the number. Sometimes it might be 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Sometimes it might be 7 minutes and 53 seconds. And then determining to go faster based on that number that I found, but not in a way that was stretching out my BPM, my heart rate. So it was like progressive improvement on speed over time with keeping heart rate around the same metric. And I did that consistently for a few months, and I felt really good and really strong. The idea being, if I'm required to run 4 1/6 mile in somewhere around 45 to 52 minutes, which is kind of our loose strategy when thinking about how long we want to be running on each one of these backyard ultra laps, I would love to feel confident knowing that I can run on a bad day or a good day that 4 1/6 mile, 28 minutes, 29 minutes, 27 minutes, 30 minutes, 31 minutes. And that confidence in my legs and in my cardiovascular capability to manage those efforts, I think gave me a real confidence going into the race. Now, when thinking about race day, it's very important to think about the few days before the race as optimal for preparation. 2 days before the race, myself and one of my tribal teammates and one of my coaching clients, Chris Boyce, and I drive down from our home in Ontario to Indianapolis. It's about a 9-hour drive. So you're in the car, you're kind of cramped up, and that's not necessarily the best for your mobility and for your flexibility, and even just for your general muscle soreness. So having a day before the race to simply stretch out, walk around, get loose, and get confident was really important. So we left on the Thursday so that we could set up our camp, get all of our things moving on Thursday, and then just sort of relax and stretch out on Friday, which we did, and that got my body feeling pretty good in terms of little muscle niggles, general soreness, and overall, I'd say mobility and flexibility. But another part of a race like this is nutrition. And a 9-hour car ride gives you a pretty solid chance to start carb loading. And so I was eating a whole bunch of rice. I'd cooked up some steak. I was eating some sourdough bread. And I was really taking seriously the importance of carb loading the 3 days before the race. This is something that we had implemented as a team in our Zion experience, thanks to the leadership of Dylan Spina, who basically forced us all to eat rice until it was coming out of our ears. But on race day, we all thanked him because our bodies held up really nicely. And I simply just continued that sort of feeding protocol and upped the amount of carbs. I think it's something about, I forget exactly what it is to your body weight, but we were eating effectively 400, 500, 600 grams of carbs 2 days before the race, and like 600, 700, 800 grams of carbs the day before the race to adequately prepare our body. And again, the reason why you want to do this is to be able to retain water, to keep yourself hydrated much more effectively and efficiently throughout the race. So this was all great. Like, I was feeling good. We were running this race with 15 people, and when thinking about like the physical expectations of how you're going to perform, I kept saying this over and over again to my tribal teammates and to the people I was coaching coming into the race. Like, it's hard to quantify the amount of energy that we're going to gain all being around each other, running the lap together, and encouraging each other to continue to go one more. So that was like kind of our X factor and our wild card was the fact that we had this big group, a tight knit group that was going to help push us to some pretty interesting places when it came to our physical performances. And a bunch of us on Friday, we went for what we call a shakedown run, which is just a really slow 25-minute jog where we went out on the course. We got our legs feeling good, but most importantly, it was a chance to say hi to people and meet. I remember my guy Kyle, who drove up from, I believe, the Dallas area down in Texas, all the way up to Indianapolis. Him and his friend Ali, they stayed in a hotel on the Thursday night, and Kyle came to the campsite ready to set up his stuff on the Friday morning, and he got out of his car, running shoes on, running shorts, running shirt, running hat, and we said, "Hey, Kyle, man, you must have known we were going for a shakedown run. You want to join us?" And he said, "Absolutely." And that was sort of the extent of sort of like the training we might do the day before. Otherwise, it's just getting nutrition, getting everything set up for the race, getting our packets, getting our gear, getting our nutrition, getting our camp set up at the race site, and then trying to get to sleep as early as possible. So I think I was in bed. The race started at 8 a.m. in the morning. Our plan was to get up at 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning to get some coffee, to get some nutrition, get those trips to the bathroom out of the way, and have a nice relaxed pace getting on over to race start, seeing everybody, and just getting ready to go without feeling rushed. I believe I was in bed, lying in my lying in my sleeping bag in our tent, probably around 8 o'clock. And that wasn't mean I was sleeping. Certainly the mind is not able to just go to sleep on race night. It's racing around as it does. But simply just lying down, letting the body relax, taking some pressure off of it. That was a big one. And had a solid night's sleep for race night. Woke up feeling ready to go. A race format like this and just any sort of early morning race start, you do want to get those bathroom visits over and early, and you want them to sort of be clean and complete. And I knew it was going to be a good day when I woke up on my own right at 5 o'clock, and the first thing I needed to do was run off to the bathroom in a really good way, an effective way, an efficient way. That was sort of like God's signal to me saying, "You're going to have a good race day, bud. I'm already here for you." So I got up, I went to the bathroom. Lo and behold, I see one of the guys on our crew, Jeremy Meeks, the Shiver King, who had brought his family down from Dryden, Ontario, and was staying in a camper pretty close to our site. He says to me, "Good morning, JB. You want some hot coffee? I got it ready to go for you." And I said, "I love you, and I'll be right over." So I go over with Jeremy. He gives me a nice hot coffee. I go back to the campsite with the guys we're staying with, which is Chris and Dylan, and I make another pot of coffee for them. We start getting our race nutrition in. I'm eating, I believe I had a banana, I had peanut butter and jelly sandwich on sourdough, and I had some Greek yogurt, along with some water, coffee, and a bunch of electrolytes. And that's what I went over to the race with. And we'll just get right into the race experience. So the way the Backyard Ultra works, again, you just start on the hour every hour. You get 1 hour to complete the lap, and so long as you're in the corral and you're out when the next lap starts, you are good to go. That first lap was, I would say the first 2 laps were basically just a celebration. It was everybody talking to, meeting each other kind of more formally on the course. And I ran quite slow just so I could be at the back with some people, soak it all in. I ran that second lap a lot with my business coach and mentor and friend, Zach Hummel, and one of my just absolute heroes and inspirations, Louis, who is the OG member of tribal training and just one of the best people. But it became clear that I couldn't run at the back, and I couldn't sort of adopt that strategy. I had a call with tribal training team leader, my coach, Ryan Dreyer, the day before, and I mentioned that this race I was supposed to go for performance, and he and Louis and a bunch of the other guys were impressing upon me the importance of just running my own race, because I'm a person who loves to give. Like, when I recorded the first race recap pod, it was obvious it was going to be about service and coaching, because that's where my heart is, right? And I have to be kind of coaxed and pushed into performing and competing for myself. So they gave me permission to run my own race. And after lap 2, that's what I did. I simply focused on running my own race, which meant running at a pace that was comfortable for my legs, fueling, getting in with enough time for me to feel comfortable, and then utilizing service and coaching as a way to provide myself energy. So on lap 3, I hit upon a new strategy, which I think was brilliant and really helped with my psychology here. Rather than running out of the gate, I started walking. Now, each one of these laps, as I mentioned, you got an hour to complete them. So how are you going to run and get back with the right amount of time? You know, for me, running at an 8:30 pace on a flat course is slow and not quite easy. And even if I was able to do that, that would be bringing me in at 34 minutes, which gives me way too much time. As I mentioned earlier, we're aiming for kind of like 15 to 10 to 8 minutes of time in the camp. So how do you get to that 45 minutes? Well, we adopt a run-walk strategy. So right from lap 1, it's 5 minutes of kind of slower running, and then 2 minutes of quick walking. And you alternate between those segments, and that sort of aims us around the right time. So instead of starting off with a run and then going to a walk, which I had been doing pretty much every lap, I began with a 2-minute walk. This was great because it allowed me to hang back and strategize and talk with Louis about the psychology of the race, how we were feeling, because Louis was one of the people I was leaning on to help coach me in real time in terms of really improving my performance. So I would walk with Louis for a bit, and then I would start jogging, and I would see every single person in our group, and I would pass them all and say hi, give them high fives, encouragement, talk to them about how they were feeling. And that gave me an amazing amount of energy. It didn't strain me, and I also got to run at the pace that was most comfortable for me. So I really got to achieve everything. And I would say that this strategy made me feel invincible on the course up until lap 12. That's the 50-mile mark. That's when you switch from the day course to the night course. And that's when most of our people had gone out before the 50-mile mark. All day my legs felt great. There was lots of people in our group that were commenting on my form, on my ability to run effectively, like effort-free. Light on his feet was something I heard a lot. Smiling, just overjoyed. Nutrition was working pretty well. I started to get a little bit of some stomach rumbles, but nothing too detrimental. I wish I could have gone to the bathroom once or twice on the course, but unfortunately just didn't. The timing didn't work out for me very well, and I would say that was the only thing that started to physically impair my performance in any way, but it was extremely minor. And when we hit lap 50, when we hit lap 12 to get to 50 miles, I was feeling great. I was feeding off the energy of everybody, and it was exactly the same race experience that I had the year before in terms of my body feeling unstoppable after those 12 laps. That's when Dylan went out last year, and I just remember feeling on top of the world and feeling like I could go forever. And that's where I found myself this race, at the 12-lap mark, hitting 50 miles, putting on the reflective gear and the headlamps to head out on the night course. Now, one thing that was different, I would say about this year was the temperature. It was markedly cooler than it was last year. Both days were really nice, kind of temperate days, but it did not get very warm during the day. The sun was nice and hot, but the air was cool, never going over 70 degrees Fahrenheit, sticking around, 18, 19 degrees Celsius. And so when the sun started to go down at the night, it did start to get cold, and layering became really important. And this was something I paid a good amount of attention to. But the first couple of laps on the night course kind of threw me off in terms of temperature. It's that not quite cold, but not quite warm feeling where you're going to either sweat because you have an extra layer, or you're going to shiver and be cold because you don't have the extra layer. And I made the conscious decision to take the extra layer because I didn't want to feel cold. And I started sweating a lot. And I would say laps 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, I adopted this strategy, and I was sweating a lot more than I had the entire day. And I started overcompensating from the sweating by taking in a lot of electrolytes, like a lot of salt. And this is ultimately what got me in sort of those night laps, right? So we go out onto lap 13. I feel good, but I again am a little chilly. Take an extra layer, start to sweat. Don't really like that combination, and this is where I think the race starts to turn for me psychologically. I mentioned that I wanted to adopt the mentality of ultimate gratitude and always being appreciative of being able to run, but I remember coming in after that one thinking, I don't like this temperature. I don't like the way it's feeling. I'm not able to kind of get comfortable. And once those seeds of doubt start getting into your mind, that's the real problem. That's the real problem. Because now your place of resolve starts to become a place of doubt, and it starts to chip away at not just your spiritual mental resolve, but ultimately your physical feeling. And that was one of the big lessons that I learned on this race. So we're going out 14, 15. I'm still getting a lot of support and energy from people in the camp who've gone out. There's still a couple of our guys on the night course, but the energy is really shifting. You're not able to just tap into other people's positive energy like you were able to on the day course. And I found it harder to sort of on the laps find those pick-me-ups. Leaving camp and coming into camp were great, but this night course is like an out and back on the road, and the sun's going down, it's getting darker and darker, and it's starting to get this feel of almost like a death march out there, right? People are still saying, great job, way to go, looking good. Everyone is still encouraging everybody else out there, but the energy is much lower, and it's starting to get a little bit harder psychologically to find the positives. And then right around lap 15, 16, all the salt that I had been ingesting to try to compensate for my loss of sweat, it started to hurt me. Now, I'm someone who's got some sensitive kidneys. I've dealt with kidney stones in the past. If you go to my social media and look at my pin tweet, you'll see the whole story. And it was one of the reasons I got into endurance running in the first place. But I'm pretty aware of what's happening in my body. And when my kidney starts to react negatively, what happens is I get a little bit of side pain, just like a low-grade discomfort. And I start to get some shooting pains, and then I also get this nausea feeling. It's not like food nausea, right, inside your stomach that you can really quell. It's kind of like something rupturing underneath the stomach that's hitting it, and you can't really get that to go away. The only way that I'm able to usually manage this, it's not like it's a tremendously intense kind of a pain. The problem is the type of event I found myself in, which is this backyard ultra, which has this increasingly difficult time requirement of finishing the lap in an hour and starting again right on the hour. Right? In a traditional ultra, if you're just say running a 100-mile race, you can slow your pace down. You can walk for an hour. You can sit in an aid camp at an aid station for 30 minutes, 40 minutes just to gather yourself. And oftentimes you need one of those stretches in one of these big time races in order to get the distance. But in this format, it's a grinder. you ought to make the time. And once I started to push pace and feel that sensation sort of like in my side, I knew I was in big trouble, right? One of the things that you can psychologically lean on in an endurance race is the fact that pain is not linear. So if I get sort of a calf pain in my muscle, I expect that, like in my mind, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. It's going to be linear or maybe even exponential. But what generally happens is that it goes up and then it kind of goes down and goes away. And this was some of the advice I was giving a lot of the runners out on the course. And it's something that I am hypersensitive to in my own training, right? When I start to feel a little bit of pain, is it going to be that up and down, like the pain is not linear, or is it going to be something that just gradually increases, right? Because that's the signal you want to pay attention to in order to not injure yourself or to have a really bad race outcome when it comes to your physical health, right? And so I started to pay a lot of attention to this sensation, and it was sort of just low grade, not getting better, getting a little bit worse each time. And then lap 17, my coach, Zach Hummel, goes out. Lap 18, the sensei, Louis, goes out. And I remember thinking, gosh, it would be nice to go out right now because I'm dealing with this pain that's getting worse and worse. It's making me nauseous. It is playing on my psychology a lot in terms of my willingness and my resolve to keep going out and to keep pushing pace in order to make this time cut off. But I knew that I could still go out there. My legs were in phenomenal shape. They were only starting to get a little bit heavy right around now, right around the 65, 70 mile point. And each time I went out there for lap 19, for lap 20, and lap 21, I was psychologically trying to do all of the right things in camp, right? I would get my watch charged up. I would say, I need my coat because I need to warm up, right? Every time I came into camp, it was, I'm going out for another lap. I'm going out for another lap. But this physical grinding was starting to get to me. And once I got out on the course on 19, on 20, and on 21, the mind simply stopped wanting to go through the pain. It stopped finding the reasons to go further, right? It was as much of a mental loss because of physical pain as opposed to like the physical sensations I was feeling really taking me out of the race. Could I have gutted out one or two more laps? It's possible. I was physically able to maybe walk a lot more, to run at a bit of a lower pace, but the sensations that I was feeling mixed with the psychology of the night and being up for 21 hours and still running all played on my mind and played on my body to a point where I felt satisfied, content, and complete ending the race when I did. And you know you've gone to your limit when the moment you stop, your body collapses. And that's exactly what happened to me. And there's a few, I think, really intriguing takeaways and lessons that I'm gonna take from this that are both sort of like specific to the race, but also more general and broad to competition. So first, when it comes to the race, there's a couple of things that I need to do differently in order to get to my goal of, let's say, a century, 100 miles in this format, placing a little bit higher and just going a little bit further. One is a better understanding of hydration and fueling, not overloading on salt, but not worrying so much about it. One thing I've noticed in sort of prepping and training for these endurance races is that we'll call it nutrition and diet related fears tend to play an outsized role in our race prep. And if you find your mind really focusing too much on one part of your nutrition plan, it's almost likely, it's almost assured that that part is going to be what blows you up on the race, right? Because the mind goes, like the body and the body goes where the mind tells it to go, right? And it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you, and if I find myself doing this in advance of the next race, find myself obsessing over one part of nutrition, like this time I was obsessing a lot about electrolytes, guess what did me in? Electrolytes. And I've seen this happen for a bunch of athletes as well. So a little bit more dialed in on nutrition and hydration, and not so much obsessive focus on one or two elements of that nutrition plan, I think will be a big help. Number two, I need people to help me gain a larger perspective in order to help me continue to move forward. So one thing I recognized, and this was just during a run last week, if somebody had told me when I came in on lap 21 that I was an hour and a bit from daybreak, that would have been a psychological boost that gave me a tremendous amount of power and energy. But I was so lost in my own pain and so lost in my own process that I couldn't even understand what time it was. And you tell me it's 5 a.m. in the morning, and that didn't mean anything to me because I've been running for 21 hours, right? And in my mind, my psychology had gotten to a point where it was going to be dark forever. Like, it was going to be dark, and it was going to be cold, and I was going to be miserable. I knew that we were going to switch to the day course in 2 or 3 hours. Like, I knew these things, but I was so loopy and lost that I couldn't bring myself to find that psychological boost. So having people in your aid station that are alert and aware and ready to help with lots of different ideas is crucial. I had amazing people who were up and willing to support me, but these were people who had run their own race, been out of the race, been up for 24 hours, and who themselves needed to go to sleep. So having a little bit more of an alert crew, I think, would be a big win for me and for anybody looking to go long in a backyard ultra. And also running strategies. So I mentioned that run walk. That became a bit of a psychological grinder for me, especially once I started feeling that side pain. Because when you're walking, now I'm not necessarily walking quite as fast because I want to gain a little bit of relief. And I'm also not able to run as fast because pushing pace is bringing up my effort, right? So before, when I can run like a 9.5 minute pace, with a really low heart rate, now I'm struggling to even hit like 11 or 11 and a half minutes with that same heart rate now. And I start to feel, pardon me, a lot of pressure on those run segments. So I think I started to burn myself out a little bit on those 5-minute runs psychologically and physically. So, and I saw one guy adopt this strategy, and he was the second place finisher. He would walk out for about 5 minutes on the night lap, just stretching out and getting warm. He ran probably about a 5K at a nice clip, and then he would walk back in the final pace. So I want to adopt that strategy for the night course. And in particular, what I want to do is take a whole bunch of my warm gear and maybe like a bottle of electrolytes with me on the walk, drop them at the side of the road, run, pick them up for the walk back into camp. I think I might find a lot of success doing something like that. So just being a little bit more open into changing up your run pacing and your strategy in the night course. And as you get more tired legs, and certainly as your mind starts to droop, moving into those night hours, that's a big one for me. Now, on competition in general, this is really cool. Now, as I mentioned, this is the first time that I'd competed for myself in about 20 years. And what did I learn? I learned that when you aim properly with your heart, you can have it all. You don't necessarily have to choose between service and performance or coaching and being the athlete, right? I need to race in a way that is genuine to who I am. Like when I was young and playing sports, I was an all-out competitor because that was reflective of how hyper competition was fueling me, right? As a testosterone and hormone-laden like teenager and adolescent. But now I'm a 38-year-old dad of 2, a husband, a coach, and I gain the most energy in the world from helping people, from serving people. So I'm never going to be able to race in a format with other people around me who I can guide, who I can coach, who I can inspire, who I can help. I need to be able to give in to those people. That's most important to me. And when I do, the hyper-competitive part of me is actually placed in proper balance, right? That idea of walking 2 minutes and then running past every single person on the laps, not to show them I'm a better runner or I'm faster or this pace is just too easy, so easy for me, but it was so I could see them gain energy from their inspiring performances and being able to maybe give a word or two of praise to themselves. That was something that was incredibly powerful for me. But I wasn't able to effectively make the transition into solely focusing on myself as the athlete once they were out. That was such a hard drop in my energy. So I need to figure out ways that competition can fuel that competitor through the service and the love I give to other people, but also return. And it's like that harmony in between giving and receiving is the proper boundary for me to not, let's say, let competition take over in my mind and make me do something silly, right? Because at the end of the day, these competitions are supposed to make us better. They're not supposed to wreck us so that we can't perform our obligations and duties. Like, I'm not interested in going for 22 laps if it means now I got to go to the hospital because I blew my kidneys up, right? Not worth it. But old me might have thought that's the only way to go in a race like this. That's the only way to go in a last man standing format. And then another big thing about competition, right? It is the answer to the question of who you are when you train in a way to bring about the best of yourself. It is the answer, right? So I got all the great answers that I wanted. Like, I'm a coach, I'm a capable runner, I'm a good athlete, I'm a strong competitor. I know that I gave everything because the moment I stopped, my body crumpled and I turned into a puddle. I was sobbing. And why was that? I was talking with my guy Joe about this the other day. And it came to me that I had been carrying a lot of expectations. Like, when you go for performance and people are looking at you to, say, win a race or to go the farthest, there's an obligation you have to do your best for them, right? And so part of that strategy of running past everyone was to show them, like, you picked the right guy. Like, your faith was placed in the guy who can run far and run well. But the second the race is over and you're finished, you can release those expectations. You can release that responsibility. You can release that pressure, which I believe was a tremendous positive pressure. But I couldn't understand why I had transitioned so quickly into a crumpled pile of sobbing mess so quickly after the race. And I think it was that releasing of expectations and knowing that I had tried my best. My body was hurting. My mind was a wreck. But my spirit was filled up. It was filled up to the brim. Watching so many people set PRs, setting a PR for myself, not necessarily hitting the objective mark that I wanted, but knowing that it was within my grasp, and with a few tweaks and a few honest sort of lessons from the performance, that I'd be able to do a lot better next time. And I guess my final takeaway for everybody here when it comes to getting back into the arena and competing for yourself seriously again is that there is no better place for an understanding of self and ultimately then an experience and an experiment in self-mastery than you get from competing into the arena. I mean, this is something that our coach Ryan Dreyer stresses, and it's something I wholly agree with, but I hadn't felt the power of it for a long time in myself, right? I'm going to still be unpacking lessons. I'm still going to be reflecting on this experience for many weeks and months to come, because I brought things out of me that weren't present in my life until I gave myself the permission to go after it again. And a lot of that has to do with strength of character, confidence in my authority, the importance of spreading and sharing love, and ultimately letting our passion, our desire, our creativity, and our imaginations fuel the most important and meaningful and valuable parts of our lives. All of that was felt and experienced, and I think I gotta stop here because I'll start to get away from the physical and I'll start to drift into the philosophical and the spiritual. What was the worst pain I experienced? The idea of low-grade nausea and side pain and striking pains, sharp striking pains, while you're trying to hit pace 20 hours into a race, and then finding the physical, mental, and spiritual resolve to clip off a 10-minute mile pace to get back into camp, man, that hurts. It hurts so much. But the conquering, man, that felt even better. And so physical pain is absolutely required. It's necessary. It's the honesty that we demand from sport. You know, one of the cool things about the Backyard Ultra is everybody gets to hit that point at some point. Maybe it's lap 4, maybe it's lap 6, maybe it's lap 21. Doesn't matter. Everybody feels it, everybody experiences it, and everybody shares in that revelry of pain together as a way to find a breakthrough. And it was really cool to experience that in a competition around other people, all feeling that together. And if you're somebody who's out there, hasn't tested themselves in a while, want to figure out what you're made of, this is the best race for you. We got people who trained a lot, people who didn't train a lot, people who are good runners, people who ain't good runners, going for 30 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles in this race format. I was able to help a bunch of them, and I know I can help you. So if you want to race with us, we're doing the same one next year. We're going to be even bigger, even better, more people, more accommodations, more personal records, more transcendence, more community building, more relationship building, more self-discovery. Hit me up on social. That DM button is always open. Send me a message, and let's start building towards your next race together, because you need to be experiencing the transcendence and the honesty that comes from pushing yourself in the arena more than you ever realized. Just like we did when we were young, we maybe even need it more now that we are older. And that is the biggest lesson that I learned. Peace and love. See you on the next one.